Well, good morning, everyone. It has been absolutely fascinating to watch the evolution of the tropics just over the last 24 hours. Yesterday, we were talking about the cluster of thunderstorms that was here off of Mexico that was developing quickly, and we had projections of this system running right up here along the Baja interacting with California. Well, in the hours after I recorded yesterday's briefing, we then watched the very rapid intensification of these thunderstorms to become now Tropical Storm Hilary, and it's very quickly going to be on its way to becoming a hurricane. Just watch the organization of these deep convective plumes start to develop a center circulation right in through here and begin its northward trek. Now that's what's going to be interesting about this. And I'm going to come back to what's going on in the Gulf and what's going on in the Atlantic in just a few moments. But I want to show you why there's concern that what is left of Hilary after several days from now will eventually make its way into California. It's all about the upper level flow. So this is the circulation in the mid-levels of the atmosphere around Hilary, all right? But if you look to the north, there is a low right in through here that is cut off. It's completely cut off from the main jet stream flow, which is pretty far to the north like this. So what ends up happening here is this massive ridge that's in Texas today spawning the heat advisories and heat warnings. As this opens and expands into the central part of the United States, this low will still be hanging out here. So what you end up getting, I'll put some arrows on this, is you get flow around a low like this. The ridge, the flow comes around the ridge like that. And you can just kind of see how that steering current is going to guide what is going to be left of Hilary right here into, well, really into Southern California. Now, again, there's been just a tremendous amount of hype about what's going to happen here. So we need to discuss that. But I find the mid-level kinematic flow of the atmosphere just to really tell the whole story. So can we look at it another way? This is later on, once we get later into this week. So here's the ridge opening on Friday night into parts of Oklahoma and eventually to Missouri. Here is the cutoff low we just mentioned, and that would be Hilary. Now, as we play this forward, can you see how this? Watch the interaction between these two features here and the larger ridge that is in the central United States. It is that interaction that's going to take the circulation from Hilary and send it closer and closer to the U.S. coastline over here. Now, meanwhile, while that's occurring, this size and depth of this, of this massive ridge in the midsection of the country is still about 3, maybe at times 4 standard deviations above the average, representing what is a substantially deep, ridge in the atmosphere, very, very large one. But it's also going to influence what's going to be coming out of the tropical Atlantic, and this is a very important point. So again, that circulation goes around ridges in clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere. So what do we end up getting? If any low pressure begins to develop here over the Bahamas, over Florida, what happens is it gets pulled to the south. So we're going to watch once we get into next week for the potential for a tropical, system, a disturbance, something to come over, Florida, Cuba, the Bahamas, get into the Gulf of Mexico, which we all know is extremely warm, and something is going to get just pulled into this direction. And we just need to be on the lookout for that over the next 7 to 10 days to see if we can get some sort of moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico into the very dry parts of Texas. So that's going to be a major focus. All right, let's go ahead and go right to the National Hurricane Center and just get an eye on a couple of these things, because here is Tropical Storm Hilary. Let's see if we got an update, an early morning update. Not yet. So now this is valid 11 p.m. And when I click on Hilary, we just get a good look here at kind of the static maps at this point. So it's still a tropical storm. It is, max sustained winds of 70. As soon as those cracks 74, we're at hurricane strength. It is probably already there, and we're just waiting to get some of that new information. But as you can see, it's expected to become a major hurricane as it approaches the Baja of California, but then weakens significantly, as typically tropical systems do, as it moves up here toward, California off the Baja. What we'll all be watching is to see if the low that's sitting and spinning off the coast helps to transition Hilary into a subtropical system. And I think the main thing just to remember here is that when we're talking about Hilary, while there could be stronger winds, winds that we are possibly going to be seeing approaching, tropical storm force in Southern California, it's going to be the rain. In fact, I want to pull up a couple of things here. Let's go look at the wind field that they've got forecast. This is the one I want, wind speed probabilities. So these are the chances that the National Hurricane Center's currently got for tropical storm force winds. And this goes out to Tuesday, August 22nd. So we're just noticing here that the northern edge of this, they're just not zero. And while we're here, let's just go do this. So I'm going to go to my website, agweather.com. I'm going to come over here to winds and inversions. And what I want to do is I want to pull up the cumulative surface wind field from the European model. And as we play this let's blow that up a little bit. We're just looking to see what that wind field looks like. Here it is from Hilary. So of course the values down here are just way up high, but we're going to see what strength winds we're expecting to come into the southwest. And so as I kind of rock back and forth, this would be Sunday into Monday. That's when we're expecting this to get into this region. We just see down here quite a few areas picking up this 40 to maybe 50 mile an hour wind. So that's what we're going to have to be watching out for here. Now, I would like to go back very quickly, go back to the National Hurricane Center site and show you the next 7 days from the from NHC. Now they're going to get us another update of this probably about an hour and a half from now. But we've got two areas out here that both have a 60% chance of developing. But in the near term, the system that I'm watching most carefully is what could possibly be coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. Now remember, this isn't in the next 48 hours. It's coming out over the next 5 to 7 days. So we'll just keep an eye on this because of what it could possibly do to return some rain to Texas. Again, I don't have any lead indicators that this is going to blow up into a large system, but we do know how warm the ocean temperatures are here in the Gulf of Mexico. So how about some operational model runs? I'm going to go straight to the European model first. This is the last of the lows that have been on parade in this area for what's been several weeks. This one dropped some good rain last night right here in parts of the upper Midwest. There's a frontal boundary stretched through here. It's going to move through the eastern Corn Belt and eastern Great Lakes. Remember, we have our stalled out boundary right along our east coast delivering some storms, and then that's out. That's by Friday. Now, as the ridge opens, not a whole lot's going to happen inside here. We're going to see storms run the periphery of this, and we're going to watch Hilary, which is right down here. So the European model, now we are only looking at a single model run. We'll do the ensembles in a second. The European model run is attempting to take what's left of Hilary by 1 a.m. on Monday and bringing it into Southern California. So we can see maybe we'll get some interaction with the moisture from this on Sunday. You can kind of see this lead kind of plume of moisture here, but then this is where we expect Hilary to be. So the potential for some very, very heavy rainfall. And remember, we still have the Tulare flooding going on here from last winter. There's still snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so to see this rain coming in, and then you can see how quickly it gets pulled around the northern side of this ridge. The ridge is just sitting here spinning. So it gets into Nevada, and this goes over Death Valley. Remember, it only takes a couple of tenths of an inch in Death Valley to cause flash flooding, so that will be something important to watch. And then that rain moves up into eastern Oregon, out of Nevada, Idaho, getting eventually into Montana. So you see the storms running around the edge, which we talked about yesterday, helping to put kind of a slowdown to the drought that's been in the southern Canadian prairie. Now, meanwhile, okay, this is out on Monday. There is a weak wave that's coming right in through here, right over parts of Florida, and that's the one that's going to get into the Gulf here, possibly delivering rain to the extremely dry regions of southern Mississippi and Louisiana. I'll show you that in a second, and then move over into central Texas. Now, this is just a bit fascinating because whatever comes out of this part of the Atlantic and moves to here, the European model is taking this, moving it right over Texas, over the Panhandle, moving into western Kansas. See, it's right here, all the way up into Nebraska, and then making it rain in Iowa, and then eventually here at the end of the 10-day run all the way to Chicago. Now, remember, we are out in la-la land for the model. So I have confidence in this bringing it into Texas, but will it really follow this trajectory? That will be something kind of fun to watch in the forecast. But you can see what it's going around. It's going around that large ridge that's going to be in place for starting this weekend and lasting all the way through the next week. Now, to show you total accumulated precip, take a look. So this is the front that's coming through, that just came through last night here. So some of that precip is in the data. This is what we're expecting today. The frontal boundary, I'll show it to you in more detail in a few moments. So see it slicing through there. And then we're going to watch the moisture from Hilary. Now there is the chance, I think, for some places in here to pick up over 6 inches of rainfall as this comes through. We're getting a better idea that there will likely be a hard edge on its eastern side with only scattered convection here in the Four Corner states. We're really finding a narrow band of heaviest rainfall. But then, take a look down here. While these storms kind of run the periphery, we're going to watch this tropical pulse come through. And remember, it goes through the panhandles, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and finishes over Iowa and Chicago. So just kind of a fascinating model run here to keep an eye on this. Most important rains, in my opinion, for agriculture are these here, some coming into Montana and what this could do in terms of just flooding out parts of the southwestern United States. The lack of rainfall in the middle is going to be very stressful on crops in this area. I'd like to show you another model run just to kind of do some comparison. This is the GFS 0Z run. So we're looking at total rainfall. It's much more aggressive on the totals here in parts of Southern California, in some places pushing above 8 to 10 inches. We'll look at the ensemble support in a second, all right? But remember, the second system coming over Florida, there it is, and then coming into Texas, this GFS run takes it all the way over toward, West Texas into New Mexico and then into along the Front Range. So it doesn't pull that moisture like we saw in the European model straight through Kansas and eventually into Iowa and in Illinois. But one of the fun things about the GFS operational run is it always makes hurricanes at the end of the run. So look, it's trying to make one off of, Cuba, the Bahamas. That's going to run up the East Coast. And then it tries to make another one way out here in the beginning of September that's going to hit down in southern Texas, Corpus Christi. So remember, this is fantasy land in the models. We do not look at this. So if you ever see this posted on Twitter, ignore it, delete it, don't look at it. It's not how this all works, okay? So another point of reference. So can I do this for you? I'm going to take this one back to a 7-day forecast, which is where we have confidence. Let's take the European model away from 10 days back to 7. So that's the 7-day Euro. This is the 7-day GFS. So look at the differences. There are a lot of similarities with the storms around the edge, but major differences with the tropical pulse coming into Texas. And I'm going to add to it the latest, sorry about that, the latest from the WPC. So remember, the WPC is just capturing the very beginning of that system coming in here. It's got heavy rains along the coast, but I think we're not yet fully seeing what the forecasters at the National Weather Service think this is going to do. But they do have an area down here in Southern California that's looking at several inches of rainfall, getting into Nevada and parts of western Arizona. So very, very wet. Okay. All right. To show you the significance of getting rain into this area, I want to go and just pull up Austin, Texas on my forecasting system. You can access this at ag-wx.com. Look at the heat that's coming in over the next 7 days. But at the end of this, the precip chances start to really increase. And it's quite important for that to happen because, honestly, the last time there was meaningful rainfall in Austin was back at the end of June, June 23rd. They've flatlined on precipitation since then. And then I mentioned New Orleans. I pulled up the data for New Orleans as well. Still very hot and very steamy in New Orleans coming up. But take a look at this. New Orleans has had a few rainfall events, a couple of them over a ½ inch here. But when you look statistically right now, this stretch of drier weather, which started in May for New Orleans, is the driest on record down there. This would be June 24th when the pattern broke after the massive drought in the Midwest, going up until yesterday. And it just shows the extent of the dryness coming from Florida along our Gulf Coast into the Southwest this year. So this is going to be a major shift for a lot of these folks down here, and we got to watch this carefully. Meanwhile, remember, since the pattern broke away from the deep and embedded ridge that slowed everything down here in the Midwest, we've seen a lot of storm activity through the midsection of the country, through the Great Lakes, and definitely into New England. Again, the time period June 24th to August 16th. All right, let's come back, put a little more sense to these model runs by looking at the ensembles. Now, you notice that the European ensemble is pretty keen on developing better chances of that rainfall coming into this area. Now, this is a 10-day outlook, so we notice that the ensemble is not so aggressive on the tail end of that forecast, but that doesn't mean it's not still a possibility. But the chances for an inch of rain very high into this area. In fact, let's step this up to the chance of 2 inches of rain and 4 inches of rain. This is where the greatest risk of that is going to be. But note, let's come back to 1 inch. This is going to be critical for the drought situation that's in the Canadian prairie. All right. Okay, so from there, I want to actually, one more thing I want to do before we get away from this. Let's just open a new tab here. I want to go to the report that we've got. This is just agweather.com/national_report. It's where I get these maps I stack up for the week 2 outlook. What you do notice in the week 2 forecast is that there's still a risk of being drier here to finish out the month. It's in all 3 models. But we are expecting that ridge to continue to influence the wetter conditions across the west, as you see in all 3 models as well. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick. So the last 72 hours is when we saw the heavy rain from very earlier in this week moving east. We then watched more precipitation hit this area last night. In fact, I'd like to just show you, if I can here, 24 hours. There we are. That's the frontal boundary that slipped through this area last night. And we're going to watch this kind of build into the eastern Great Lakes and eastern Corn Belt later. That front's going to continue to slide into this direction. We're expecting to see more storms lining up on the stalled out boundary here, but this is going to be the area of most change going forward. Our all hazards weather map points out a couple of important things. We've only got another day of this in the Pacific Northwest with the heat advisories, excessive heat watches and warnings. We have an air quality alert out for parts of the upper Midwest, Minnesota and Wisconsin, and we now have excessive heat warnings back into central Texas. Now, the air quality issues are coming from yesterday's wildfire smoke in the west. So if you take a look, the deeper low, the last of them that are going to be coming through here for a while, pulled smoke out of British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest right here through Montana and into the upper Midwest eventually as we watch the sunset here. And it's going to be that smoke that's going to be sitting over this area behind the front today. We will be ending, I think, the streak of from the Storm Prediction Center on issuing slight risks. And let's get an update. They have not changed this. Nope. So today we'll just watch for stronger storms here in parts of the eastern Corn Belt, eastern Great Lakes. And that's it. That could be the end of the streak that started on June 8th. So to take a look at that, this is the high-res NAM model. Starting off this morning, you can just watch that frontal boundary slice through parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And then it's going to move through Ontario, wrapping itself up into the deeper low. So this is going to increase tonight into tomorrow morning chances of storms throughout a broad area of the Northeast. We will get another shot at getting some storms down into parts of eastern North Carolina, a drier area here. But after that moves through, there's not a whole lot going on except for what Hilary is going to do, which we've talked quite a bit about. All right, so the dryness that's coming in and the heat that's coming into the Midwest, I want to try to investigate a few places. Top 4 inches, we've seen pretty quick drying here in parts of Nebraska. This particular section of Iowa, get up northern Wisconsin, despite some recent precipitation. We've seen some drier weather lately coming into this section of the Corn Belt, and we've talked extensively about these two areas showing up drier over time. The moisture from what's coming into California, remember, is expected to follow this, so I don't think much precipitation is expected to come into this part of the I-5 corridor, the Willamette Valley, getting up towards Seattle, which continues to be a major concern. But these areas are going to be very vulnerable to the heat that's coming in here very soon, and I want to show you what that heat looks like in just a moment. But to back that up, that soil moisture map, you can start to see those areas showing up over the last 2 weeks of not having much precipitation compared to normal. Now, this is nothing compared to what's going on down south, where we've not measured rainfall in some places for 45 days or longer. But it's just to stress that there are some areas that have critical stages of the crop that need moisture now and don't need the heat. But there are other parts of this crop that do need the heat to get in here. If you've double cropped on wheat for soybeans down in the Mid-South, we need heat on that crop to get it to finish. So it's kind of a mixed bag on what people are wanting out of this. So I keep talking about it. Let's finally show it. This is the latest from the National Digital Forecast Database. So again, today on Thursday, getting into Friday, we've got the cooler air behind the front. But already by Friday, we're seeing 100-degree weather stretch from Texas to Montana and into the southern Canadian prairie. This goes into Saturday. That moves into the central U.S. And again, watch the cool down happen over here. This would be Saturday into Sunday. A lot of cool weather coming into the southwest. I mean, to be at 95 degrees Fahrenheit in August in Phoenix is going to feel like a cold day for a lot of folks down here. But the heat will be from Texas all the way to Wisconsin. You can see 100-degree heat on Sunday. This is going to be coming in multiple pulses. So this is Monday's high temperatures. Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we just continue to keep that around. Now, you saw earlier in the forecast model run, this guy way back here, that once we get out there around day 8, 9, and 10, we redevelop this Canadian maritime trough. The models have not really been overly aggressive on its depth, which is starting to increase the length of some of the heat in the central United States. And the way to show you that is to go to the 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. So I'm going to take you out there day 5 through 10. There's that trough developing. But now, instead of the end of August it eating into this, we can now see it sticking around a little bit longer with the higher temperatures. So that means much of the central United States has a good 10-day stretch of very hot temperatures that are coming into the Midwest. A lot of mid to upper 90s and cracking 100 the farther south you go here. Now, this is what's really beginning to influence the forecast, I think, for the month of September. And I want to talk about that as we wrap this one up. This is the newest outlook from the European model, extended forecast for the month of September on precipitation anomalies. As we always discuss, we do not have confidence in a long-range forecast for September in those areas, especially in Florida too. I should circle Florida. And that's because these models can't forecast hurricanes. The long-range models are not designed to do that. But what is interesting is that you don't see strong signals for major drought redevelopment in places. But what I do want to stress is, even though the CPC has gone over cooler in this area for the beginning of September, I don't think that's going to be a viable forecast. I do think we're going to see above average temperatures for a while here. And there's a lot of support for this. We try to pull together a bunch of different teleconnections to give us this idea. And I think the biggest one is that we see that our El Nino continues to grab hold of this pattern. We've talked about this a lot this week. The Southern Oscillation Index is down here about -13, which is well below the threshold needed. We've watched the MJO move out into, or be forecast to move out into the Pacific. That's a very El Nino trait that gives us better rising motion over Africa, which you can see on both sides of this map here. That's what's going to continue to spawn a lot of tropical activity. And in addition to that, some of the new forecast graphics really suggest a pretty sizable increase from August into September and beyond of those ocean temperatures. Now, I still think that the Bureau of Meteorology, which is the most aggressive, has probably got this maybe a half a degree or more too warm going forward. But it certainly suggests that we will have a setup in the month of September that could really just push some warmer conditions for a while into the mid part of the United States. What I don't understand with this pattern is what it's going to do to the temperature pattern in the west. That's the trickiest part of it. But while we expect warmer conditions at times in September, warmer than average, there's pretty good ideas that if El Nino is the dominant factor into the month of October, which is suggested here, that you look historically, this is what happens in the month of October. We tend to be quite cool. So it means that September and October tend to be two entirely different months in terms of their temperature and precipitation characteristics when we have a rapidly strengthening El Nino event. And we run the risk across a broad section of the country to have cooler conditions. Now, when you stitch all these years together, it's only off by a degree. So don't be fooled by the color here suggesting that it's going to be brutally cold. That's not what I'm calling for. It's just it's showing you the phase that it's not going to be hot if El Nino dominates. I think that's the takeaway. All right, be safe if you're keeping an eye on these tropical systems, and if you're also going to be dealing with the heat in the midsection of the country. I will talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks.